Act like a professional. Come on, we're starting the show
What's
now.
up, guys? What's up, mediums? Welcome to another episode of Thursday Night Live here on Keystroke Medium. It's season 2, episode 46. I am Josh Muscles. I am Josh Muscle Shirt Hayes, apparently, and Scott is
I'm just
I
Scott.
don't know what his nickname is
I didn't
tonight.
put it in one for mine. I just changed yours while you were gone.
I appreciate that.
You went to get dressed up and get nice and spiffy for our guests and put on a collar and shirt and everything. And so while you were gone, I of course took the liberties to edit the show notes, and that's why for all of our loyal
I'm going to have to do a pre-read next time, but whatever. Michael Cooper is making a triumphant return to Keystroke Medium tonight. He's the author of the Orion War and Intrepid Saga, and he's been writing and publishing military science fiction and space opera for 5 years. And tonight he comes back to the show to talk about writing better space battles and also sleeveless shirts. So, Michael, welcome back to the show.
I do not possess any sleeveless shirts, so I actually can't speak to that.
We're gonna have to rectify that. So if you need to have at least one sleeveless shirt.
Yeah, he shows up to the pre-show and he's like, "Who are these guys?" Join our tats. We had a great talk about sleeveless shirts and tattoos and. I'm crying already. See,
ridiculous.
By the end of the show, my eyes are all moist because I've been crying with laughter the whole time.
I've seen twice in the last 3 days, so I've got all my crying done.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, like we like to do here on Thursday night, we like to talk about our week a little bit. Since Scott put me on the spot with my intro, I'm going to put him on the spot because I'm sure he hasn't thought of something that he's been up to this week.
Contraire.
Oh, he has. Okay. Well, please share. Share.
Not by any fault of my own, but just kind of happened to me like literally right before the show started. So, of course, I did a pre-release. We were talking about pre-releases before the show. Might be something we want to talk about because I think a lot of the viewers might be interested in some of those insights to a certain extent. But anyway, I put a book on pre-order, and it came back to haunt me because I got busy, but I got it done. I got it off to the editor. So Heavy Weapons is the third and probably final series in my Viking sci-fi series for now. And that's done, and it's up for pre-order, and I'm very happy.
Nice.
Happy with that turned out. But the big thing for me is that I got a notice from Keith Mickelson, who did my audio book narration, and that it's finally live. ACX has been like giving us a lot of problems with getting stuff approved. It says anybody that's used ACX for audio books will be familiar with the stage where it says your book is headed to retail. Well, my Weapons of Earth was headed to retail for like 4 weeks, and I kept sending them emails. It's now live. I put it on my website, and I listened to the preview, the sample, and I absolutely love it. He did a really awesome job, and I'm super proud of it. So if anybody wants to go to scottmoonwriter.com, you can find that. But
that's awesome.
So that's what I did. Yep, that's me right there. And I don't got a collared shirt either. Like somebody else.
I wonder if I should have worn my sleeveless shirt under my collared shirt.
I kind of wonder if you were. You could like rip it off at some point.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. It's like the hat swap.
Yeah.
Michael, what have you been up to this week, bud?
So on, I guess it was technically last week, but at the very end of last week, we released Pew Pew, which is a comedic anthology that I did with 8 other authors, and that's been going really well. We've moved 1,300 or 1,400 copies already since last week. Yeah, so it's gone really well right out of the gate. About 250 of those were on pre-order. And then my first book in my Aeon 14 universe with a co-author came out as well on Sunday, and that's done really well too. It's moved about 700 or 800 books now as well. So it's been a fun week.
What's the name of the book you wrote with the co-author?
It's called Close Proximity.
Close Proximity.
What's the? Tell us a little bit about that.
So that one is one of the main premises of my series is that there's a colony ship that's appeared after a bit of a hiatus, 5,000 years, and it has better technology than anybody else out there, and mainly because they came from humanity's golden age. And one of the main premises in the series is that the advent of fashion light travel actually ruins humanity. because before that there could be no interstellar war, and as soon as FTL appeared, suddenly people could actually make war and whatnot, and a couple of them broke out and it threw everybody back in the dark age. So so one of the characters sells a bunch of her technology in this one system to get some weapons on a ship so she can go back somewhere. And this book, Close Proximity, is all about the fallout of these super advanced weapons being sold and who has control of them and what's going on and whatnot. And eventually she's got to come back and clean up the mess that she made when she did that. So that's for this book is kicking off a trilogy that's going to come back around with the main characters from the main series actually having to show up and help out these new characters solve this problem that they created. So it's going to be really fun.
That's an awesome premise. It's like in the genre, hits all the genre things, but it's very unique. I mean, I like it. It's good. Good stuff.
Yeah, it took me quite a while to come up with the whole thing. It actually was one trigger. I mean, this is the way I was doing Thursdays, from what I can tell anyway. It was on for you guys. You guys were
off to a great start. So
yeah.
The show with Kevin Sorbo called Andromeda. Yeah, so there was this one episode where this one sublight, they're in the Andromeda Galaxy, and this one ship, they come across it, and it's been traveling at the speed of light for like 5,000 years from Earth. And they're going to this colony world somewhere on the far back end of Andromeda, and they've been at it for 5,000 years. And you're like, we have faster light travel now. You guys want to lift? They're like, no, we got this.
We're almost there.
Yeah, exactly. So that combined with a bunch of other things, I thought, what would happen if they were actually cool instead of like throwbacks? Kind of the whole thing kind of came from there. So there's my whole idea.
That's awesome. Speaking of throwbacks and sleeveless muscle shirts, Josh, what'd you do this week?
that was a horrible segue. That was like my speaking of turd. You have a podcast segue for
segue from last
Chuck's.
one.
Yeah.
Go down in infamy, in internet infamy.
I haven't done a whole lot this week. I made some progress on my short story for Explorations War. I'm bringing back
Ears.
Yes. I'm going to bring back my crew from the first Explorations anthology and kind of like some hand-wavium wormhole-ish space-time continuum rip in space type deal. And everybody loved Ears from the first Explorations wormhole story that I did. It was a silver and purple monkey that was sarcastic and spoke with an English accent. So I'm going to bring him back and the crew. And I started doing it on dictation. So
like on your phone or on your computer or something else?
On the computer. Doing it on the computer and I got like 1,200 words done in like, I don't know, half an hour or something, just sitting there kind of drafting it. So
it's a good tool.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into this topic here. Michael, you approached us with the topic for the space battles deal, and obviously you have written a number of those and a number of books centered around that. If you would just kind of give our audience members kind of a rundown of you and your history and writing experience, and then we'll jump into the topic.
And you could please also catalog any type of sleeveless like biker shirts you got.
Yes.
I don't own any shirts without sleeves. I'm like super white German from from Canada, so I burn in about 4.5 seconds. So I actually go outside, I've actually bought a burqa, and that's what I wear whenever I go outside.
That's awesome.
It's not cultural appropriation at all, I'm sure. So I've been like a lot of you guys, I'm sure I've been writing for, ever since I put down Lord of the Return of the King and said this damn story's not over till I say it's over. I started writing stuff in it. And so I actually for a long time wrote a lot of fantasy. And I still have binders of horrible fantasy that I wrote as a kid and stuff like that. There was the One Ring and everything. It was all the wrong stuff. But then after watching Firefly of all things, I was like, because I read a lot of science fiction. I watched Firefly. I'm like, I want to write science fiction. I have to do this. I want to write. I want to write westerns in space and stuff like that. And the funny thing is, I don't write westerns in space at all, as it turns out. I really wanted to. And so, like, I actually found some of my original notes the other day, and I started writing this whole universe I created back in 2006, and tried to go the traditional route for a while with a couple of the books, and then eventually self-published in June 2nd of 2012. So I'm just about my 5-year anniversary for self-publishing, and I've got 7 books out now. One of them being co-authored, and I'm going to have another 8 out this year if everything goes according to plan. So things are ramping up pretty quickly now.
That's a lot of writing and a lot of teamwork.
It is, yeah. It's a lot of the doing the co-authoring stuff is actually a lot more. It's more work than I thought it'd be, but it's a lot of fun because there's stories I would never have thought of.
Oh, yeah,
that out of it too.
Collaboration is an interesting thing, and I think it makes stuff better. But you know, there's pros and cons, I guess.
Yeah,
I should shut up.
I mean, I think that the collaboration is becoming more and more prevalent, especially in indie publishing. I mean, you look at what who was it? Jay Thorne and Lindsay Broker and Joanna Penn did on there was some other guy, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry to that guy, but they did that train trip and then wrote the novel in a week or whatever in New Orleans, and then you're doing collaboration. Michael Anderley's doing collaboration.
He's got a couple other. Yeah, I think Michael Anderley has 15 people now that are working in his universe.
He's got a whole stable of awesome writers, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's definitely a very interesting new direction. And I was listening to the SPP guys today, and they were talking to Jay Thorne and Lindsay Broker on their, I mean, it wasn't live, but it was on their feed, and they made the connection of, like, you know, TV movies and TV shows, when they're not just written by one person, they're written by a whole group of people in a room throwing ideas around. So there's a potential for collaborative writing to just expand and make things huge and big and awesome, instead of just coming. I mean, obviously
makes a project bigger and grander, but also everybody, if they're working well, develops. You know, because you develop and learn from your experience when you're writing with somebody, sharing those ideas. And
and you can see some of your own weaknesses as well. It's good for highlighting some of those too. You're like, wow, I can tell that they're copying a thing I'm doing, and it doesn't look as cool as I thought it did, but I'm not writing it, which means it wasn't that cool when I wrote it either.
Exactly. Yeah. So the space battles, making them better, making them spacier, making them battlier.
So when I was chatting with I think it was Scott about this coming on and doing it again, and I was in the middle of writing my book will be out June 22nd, which is called Orion Rising. And Orion Rising has a battle between about 190,000 spaceships. So when you guys want to talk about, the only thing in my brain at that point was like, I've been keeping track of ship counts now for days. So that's the only thing I can think about. And the book is actually almost entirely one single space battle. It broke up because part of what I write is I write very real science fiction space battles where a battle might take a couple of days to complete it just in one system. And this all
no, go ahead.
This all came ironically out of Firefly as well, because when Firefly came out, I don't know if you guys remember, but they kept changing the intro all the time, and it was like, you couldn't tell, is this one star system with hundreds of planets that they terraformed and one star? Like, what's going on? Like, I couldn't tell. I started thinking about it. I started doing a lot more research into, orbital dynamics and crazy stuff that no one else ever cares about, and learning about like what comprises of a star system. How big is it really? Like, because we think of most star systems, we think of, you watch Star Trek where they fly down to the one planet and everybody lives on the planet and whatnot. And the more I researched it, the more I'm like, planets are stupid places for people to live. There's not that much room on a planet. I mean, planet Earth only has 3% arable space, arable land. It only has 7%. Yeah, it's really not a great place to live. So I thought about where people really live, and you think about like building orbital structures and rings around planets and whatnot. You can build a ring around Mars, make it 1,000 miles across, 1,000 kilometers wide, at the geosynchronous orbital point, and it will actually have 10 times the habitable space of Earth. Now you make 100 levels deep. Now the thing has 1,000 times the habitable space of planet Earth. And you start thinking like, okay, well, space is no longer an issue. You can put people anywhere once you start doing crazy stuff like that. And people, I've actually been, a couple of people said, well, where's the material to build that sort of stuff? And you say, well, Mercury. Mercury actually has enough material to build a Dyson sphere around the entire sun.
Wow.
Yeah, Mercury is actually like just a giant ball of iron. It's actually the core of a larger planet that got smashed into by something. It's just it's the core of a larger planet just floating around by the sun, and it's basically just a big iron ball. And you could actually build a sphere all the way around the sun at Earth's orbital point just from the matter inside of Mercury. So there's the materials there, and I thought, okay, well, people are going to live a long time. We're not going to have to worry about anywhere to go because we'll just build more stuff. And I started thinking, well, okay, what kind of population are you going to have? So I wanted to jump a ways ahead because I wanted to go past the singularity, the sort of like the man versus machine type of thing, and say, what happens if we just sort of sing kumbaya, we put AIs in our brains and we go from there, and we're all happy with that. Like my main character is actually probably only about 40% organic, but she looks perfectly normal. And for that world they live in, it's very normal to have machines in your body. She eventually grew a second heart because she kept getting shot in the chest.
As one does.
As you
Yeah,
would do,
exactly.
as a responsible, combat veteran would do, is just grow some extra organs and move on.
Exactly. So I started thinking about like people will eventually live everywhere, and our solar system is actually got a ton of stuff in it. Earth is actually just one little speck. I mean, Earth is unique because it's actually the densest thing in the solar system, which is sort of an interesting. When I learned that, I thought that was kind of our planet actually is the densest and actually has the most exotic matter. But there are over 200 planets in the solar system. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but they think there's at least 200 dwarf planets out beyond the orbit of Pluto. There's actually 2 dwarf planets in the asteroid belt. There's Vesta and Ceres. Vesta isn't officially a dwarf planet yet, but it will be very soon.
What makes something a dwarf planet?
Yeah, so I started thinking, well, would people live in all these places? Like, would they actually do that? Would you inhabit all these different asteroids and dwarf worlds out there and whatnot? And then I thought to myself, why do people live in Cleveland? So I mentioned that when I was talking about this show. I actually had this thought. I'm like, because I grew up in a place that makes Cleveland look like a burgeoning metropolis. And actually, ironically,
the Drew Carey show was in Cleveland.
Cleveland actually has a really interesting history. I looked it up before this show because I'm like, I'm going to actually talk about Cleveland. Someone's going to call me out if I screw something up. Between 1840 and 1860, it was the 6th largest city in the United States, and for a long time, it was one of the top 10 cities in the United States for size. And they invented they had the first 500,000 watt radio tower and a whole bunch of other they had the first professional fire department in the entire world was in Cleveland. So anyway, crazy stuff happened in Cleveland. But I thought to myself, like, why do people live in Cleveland? And where I grew up is Swift Current, Saskatchewan, which is like, when you walk when you get the edge of town, you're at the edge of town. There's grass. It's hard. If you stare really hard, you can see your dog running away for 3 days type of thing. Like, it's flat and there's nothing. Yeah. So I thought about well, you know what? People would live there because people live in stupid places on Earth right now. Like, you go in the ocean, you go land on some random island. There's some guy's got a house there. Like, why do people live here? So I thought people would live everywhere in the system, which means when you're thinking about a side.
Oh,
come back. Come back, Jack. Oh, there he is.
We
lost you for just a second.
Did I disappear? All right, sorry.
Yeah.
I was saying when you're, am I still here?
Yep.
Yeah, you're here. We're talking about people living in dumb places and
live in dumb places. So when you think about a star system now, you're thinking, okay, it's not just 1 or 2 terraformed planets down by the star. It's hundreds of planets everywhere. Did I say Cleveland? I might have meant to say Cincinnati. Now that I think about it.
Cincinnati, Kansas, it's all the same.
Exactly, yeah. Cincinnati is actually the one that actually was the 6th largest city for a while. But yeah, the same difference though. It's like, why are they even there? But so I thought, okay, we're going to end up with hundreds of planets all around a star system with people living around all of them and whatnot. And I actually did a bunch of math because I'm a crazy person, and I worked out that you could probably fit about 10 trillion people in the solar system without too much trouble, living in all these different asteroids and orbital structures and whatnot. And I thought, okay, what does a navy look like? What would the official government navy look like for 10 trillion people? It's about 7 million ships that they would have. Patrol craft, the Coast Guard's equivalent stuff. Because I worked it out. I said, okay, in World War II, the United States Navy ran 6,900 ships, which was 1 ship for every 20,000 people in the country. So you work out, okay, well, what's 1 ship for every 20,000 people out of 10 trillion people? And you come out with, actually, I think you come out with something even larger than 10 million ships. But I scaled it down because I thought no one's going to believe like 100 million ship movie.
Yeah. That can't happen.
At a certain point, you don't really need it anymore. You're like, you just fly over there, you shoot them, and you fly somewhere else and you shoot them, and you're all fine. So I actually drilled all the way down to 1 million. I said 1 million ships, and I'll just leave it at that. And so I first came up with the idea. Okay, there's stuff everywhere in space. It's not just one space station around one planet or something like that. It's like you fly into a star system, and you are going to have tens of thousands of inhabited locations, asteroids, dwarf worlds, all the moons around these major planets. People will live everywhere, and they're going to have this map. You're going to have ships everywhere. In fact, the merchant ships alone would be in the tens of millions in most star systems that you would have just floating around doing stuff. And then so I thought about all that. Okay, there's stuff everywhere. It's not just the Enterprise and one Romulan ship show up and they like this and they do this. Off. Yeah, can you imagine that? So this is the other thing. Like you're flying along your starship and you're like, all stop. The amount of time it takes you to say all stop, you're a different fucking star system at that point.
Like, why don't we go around? I don't know. We have to go right into them. There's not enough space to maneuver around them in space.
It's true though.
Yeah. So the other thing you run into is you're like, okay, I've got all these ships now all over the place. Lasers in space can shoot a really long distance. And so you see most of these ships, you see most of these shows, like you watch the opening of Revenge of the Sith for Star Wars, and you got starships broadsiding each other, and I just about threw up in my mouth when I saw that.
But in a good way.
We don't do that now. Like if you're in the U.S. Navy and you wait until you see the other ship before you shoot at it, you're probably already dead.
Too late, right?
You're thinking, well, that's happening. Like that, we don't do that now. That sort of thing doesn't happen. And starships in space would be able to shoot each other before you could even begin to glimpse the other ship. You'd be shooting each other from 100,000 to 500,000 kilometers apart. Mm-hmm. And you'd be doing it at incredible speeds. You might be, well, you're either going really slow because it takes a long time to accelerate, and you're doing it very, very fast because you come into a system at a high speed and you fly past a bunch of things and you shoot them, and then you spend like 6 months turning around or something like that. Actually, what it could take to do.
You can like take your vacation. I got some use or lose vacation time I need to use up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm gonna drop it in place and do something good.
But I did a lot of thinking about that. I thought and actually my series kind of progresses because at the very beginning they don't have artificial gravity, they don't have inertial dampeners and stuff like that. So yeah, if you do actually fly into a system at like 70% the speed of light, you will actually probably take a year to turn around and come back to finish that fight. As things progress and whatnot, they actually get inertial dampeners and stuff like that, so they can actually do high speed turns and stuff like that and change things around. But even still, a battle can take like a couple dozen hours to flash out. You'll have ships crossing by. So you think about like, okay, now I've got these ships and they're firing at each other before they can even see one another. So that makes things kind of interesting because it really changes what you can do in the story. You don't have a lot of close flybys and stuff like that. You don't have a lot of scenarios where you could crash into the other ships. Like crashing into the ship would just never happen.
So where do you start? Like, so somebody like me who's, I've written some space battles, read a lot of space battles. So if I was going to say, I need a space battle for my book, what's the first thing I should do to set myself on a good foundation?
The first thing you would do is you think about, okay, well, how populated is the system they're coming into, for starters? I mean, even a system that has the population of Earth, but they're space-based, could have about 7 or not 7, they could have, I worked this out before the show started, 50,000 warships would be a pretty easy number. If you have 10 billion people, you're going to have 50,000 warships in your system. So, okay, now you're like, okay, if it's a populated system, it's got 10 billion people living in it, I can't show up with like a couple dozen ships. I'm going to get obliterated in about 4.5 seconds when I show up in the system. Heck, the pirates probably have more ships than I do. There we go. So you'd have to think about that, like how populated is the system? How many people actually live there? Where are they based? And different types of science fiction is different. Like, do you allow faster than light travel within the system? One of the things I do is I don't allow faster than light travel within the system. You have to go to the edge of the system, which makes it, I think, a lot more fun because now you have to jump into the system and it could take you a week to get to one of the planets and what can happen when you
some limitations. We had some questions. Josh, you want to help me dig out any questions out of
the first one was from J.R. Hanley, who asked, and this was when you were talking about having your your million ships. He wanted to know if you were using spreadsheets, I assume, to keep track of the ships. And then Richard Fox.
Same
I'm
thing.
drinking Gatorade tonight, I swear to God. How do you work out all the math, or do you work out all the math for your battles? It's kind of similar to what Weber did in his Honor Harrington series.
I do a fair bit of it. I make sure that I describe things sort of in enough general terms that I can fudge some things, because I write, the kind of reader that reads a lot of the military science fiction stuff. They're picky bastards. Let's be honest. And I love my picky bastards, but they'll flam if I make a mistake. So I try to describe things fairly generally. Like, I don't get too detailed. But there's a lot of websites. If you just look up things like the relativistic rocket is a great website that actually allows you to calculate acceleration times and stuff like that. And how long it takes to accelerate and decelerate at different times, turn around and whatnot. There's a great website, and it's actually for a shared universe of gamers called the Orion Arm, and they actually describe all sorts of weapon systems and different types of engines and how they would perform and stuff like that. So it's a great resource, actually, if you kind of want to not have to figure out the physics of your own engine and how it would behave. You can go to the orionarm.com and look up a lot of stuff there. And I base loosely a lot of my stuff on research I've done there. But yeah, a lot of it does actually come down to, I've spent years researching this now, so I have a fairly good understanding of the forces that are applied. Like I do have spreadsheets and notes that tell me how many newtons of thrust the engines on these different ships apply and stuff like that. I never put it in the story because it's boring as hell to the readers, but
right.
I know it for myself, so that's there.
So when you start out, let's make a comparison here, or a point counterpoint. When we start out, we're talking about your battles where you have these large epic space battles, and you have, I don't know, say 50,000 ships in a battle. How do you, or you say the Orion Rising is basically one big space battle. How do you orchestrate that on paper so that it's not overwhelming and those numbers are understandable to the reader?
Or boring as hell could be another scenario.
Right.
So it was interesting. Someone mentioned Honor Harrington, David Weber stuff. Some of the recent, one of the things I did actually before I got to the stage is I read the reviews in his latest books, and I get compared. I've got a lot of reviews actually compare my main character to Honor and some of my stuff to David Weber stuff. But a lot of people are saying his later books are getting kind of dull because all this is a bunch of admirals standing around talking about what they're going to do.
It's very true.
And so I've kind of got that scenario too now, because my main character Tanis is last book she was pregnant, so she wasn't going to go running around, doing any crazy stuff. And in this book, she's commanding all of these fleets, so she's obviously in the center of the most powerful ship in the fleet and not in that much danger. So I ended up writing most of it from smaller characters' points of view. And actually, this latest book was actually a lot of fun because Tanis has 2 kids now, and they steal a starship and get into the fight.
Nice.
So that gave me, so then I get to tell all this stuff from their point of view, because they're just basically having oh shit moments continuously, where Tanis is just like, yeah, we're gonna do this and do that and so on and so forth, and honestly rather boring. So so I just went with the went with the kids basically. The fight. They're not.
So you have multiple points of view in your story, so you can get some relief in your plot lines a little bit if you need to.
Yeah, this book has 13 points of view. It was going to have 16, but I cut out 3, which probably is forever. But the other interesting thing that you get into when you talk about space battles is you have to think a lot about, everything that anybody comes up with as a weapon, someone else is going to have a defense for. Because no one's just floating around there with, if anybody has the weapon that no one else can defeat, they're already in charge. They've already won.
Right.
Okay, well, what's the defense for all these different weapons? And one of my favorite ones came from, if you guys ever read Mike Shepard's Chris Longknife books.
I've heard of them, but I haven't read it, no.
You've got about 1 billion of them now. But in one of the first ones, all the fleets go off, and they go off to fight this big battle. And a couple of people are left behind. And they're like, no, we're going to get attacked. We're pretty sure we're going to get attacked. That was the feint. The real fight's coming this way. So they pull out all these old ships they call the battle wagons that they had floating around somewhere. And they use the battle wagons to defend the system. And the battle wagons were sheathed in ice, and they rotated. So I'm like, because all the weapons were lasers,
right?
Visual lasers. I'm like, that's genius, because a laser's you got all these starships floating around with a blade of plating and whatnot. Ice is really cheap. You just fly, fly through a de-icer machine type of thing, like the airports have. have the opposite, the icing machine, and you just fly your ship through that, and boom, now your sheet's nice, and you rotate. So the beam hitting you isn't hitting the same place for very long.
Right.
So I started thinking about that, like, how would ships behave? How would they operate in space? And even like, a laser beam is going to travel at 166,000 miles, 166 million miles per second. No, 166,000 miles per second. So you got a ship that's maybe at your extreme range, 100,000 miles, 200,000 miles. You can hit them in a second. The problem is they're also moving, couple hundred, maybe 10, 20,000 miles per second as well. So there's a lot of targeting issues. So you can play around with that a lot. You can talk about how it's hard to target the other ships when they're really far away. So that's why you have to get closer. Or maybe someone gets a better targeting system, or they crack, because when ships are flying around space like this, they're going to be using what a lot of people call jinking patterns, where they're going to be moving around like crazy, because if you fly in a straight line, you're doomed. So they're always moving around. So maybe you could write stories where someone else cracks their jinking pattern, or the intel guys go out there and a spy gets the patterns that they're using, so you can crack that. And you can target where they're going to be based on where they are right now, and you can do a lot of fun stuff like that. I like using kinetic weapons a lot in space.
I like kinetic weapons, and in the books I've read, I enjoy some of the things that have been done with them. Yeah, so they're a ton of fun. And they're not very good for hitting other starships, but they're great for hitting, if you want to hit something on a planet. In fact, planets are horrible things when you're in space battles, because they can't move out of the way. So you just got some ship, you got a ship from Halo with a big Mac gun on. You fire that at a planet, that thing's done. Yeah, probably if you live in an intergalactic community, like you're saying, with millions of people, and war breaks out, probably the first thing you should do is get off the planet.
Get the hell off the planet.
I'm getting off of this target drop zone.
Yeah, giant non-movable target that's just hanging out there all the time. And the other thing, actually, I'm pretty sure I stole it from somebody else, because there are no original ideas anymore. But kinetic grape shot is pretty awesome. I use that a lot in my books.
Oh yeah,
they just fire just giant clouds of pebbles into space, and that just tears people apart. So you can do a lot of fun things with that. And the other things that are pretty neat too are getting into particle cannons. So right now we have lasers which are firing photons, but you want to get a little more mass, you can fire electrons. And electron guns are fucking cool. Can I swear in this podcast? I've already done
yes, you may.
You can. Matter of fact, that might open the door for us to.
Yeah, an electron gun.
We talked a lot about profanity in the last show, but we don't generally use it, which is
I'm
weird.
I'm fairly certain that you can't mention electron gun without cursing. So I think that's a rule.
So back to the electron gun.
It's electron gun.
Electron gun.
It's a fucking electron gun. It's firing electrons at the speed of light, which means that you actually have mass particles that actually have mass moving at just under the speed of light, and they hit something. And an electron gun will look like a straight bolt of lightning, with like a blue glow, an atmosphere will have a blue glow around it from radiation. Cool. And when the electrons actually hit the target, they actually disintegrate. They'll actually break down into subatomic particles and shower whatever they're hitting with radiation, and like lightning will strike out everywhere from where the electron gun hits. Which is
totally
really
down with that.
Yeah, so I mean, the more I start researching these weapons they'd be using in space, these things are awesome. I can't wait to describe this shit, because lasers are boring. Lasers are invisible. You can't even see them, but an electron gun, that's the shit.
That's awesome. That reminds me, when you were talking about the speed of lasers, and I can't remember what it was, 166,000 kilometers per second or something like that. Very close. But and then you're talking about these massive distances of your fleet. So if you're like in another ship and you can't see the enemy fleet yet, would they see that laser coming? Could they?
Well, you can't see a laser coming because it's moving at the speed of light.
Oh, okay. But I didn't know if from such a great distance. You know what I'm saying?
You can't see the laser coming. That's the thing, because there's nothing moves faster. Information doesn't move faster than the speed of light. So you will learn about that laser hitting you when it hits you.
Okay.
Yeah, which makes
me on laser light. See, I'm taking all the lasers out of my books now because now I'm embarrassed. So that's it.
Well, you could say they were plasma. Plasma moves slow. Get away with that.
I was just looking for a cool visual. My bad.
Well, I mean, but the other cool thing is you can use electron guns. Don't have to fire electrons at the speed of light. They can fire them slower. And you actually, the next thing you have is proton guns. Proton rail guns, protons weigh a lot more than electrons. And when a proton hits, it will actually, if you fired proton guns at a planet, you would just destroy that planet from radiation more than anything else. And then the big daddy is firing hydrogen atoms at the speed of light, which is actually a thing that you could theoretically do if you had enough energy to do it. But the thing that I learned as I started researching all this stuff is that, and there's actually some other authors who have quoted this, is that most starships have engines that are more powerful than most of the weapons that people describe in their books. Like if you're like something that can create a warp drive is actually way more powerful than just about any weapon that you see in most books. There's no lasers that are as powerful as a warp drive. Or if you have you run a bunch of fusion engines, you have a bunch of fusion engines in a starship that can take a starship from 0 to 1% of the speed of light in about 10 hours. That's actually more energy than humanity has ever conceived of in our entire existence on this planet, that starship would use. So you'd actually just take a starship, a massive starship, like maybe something 10 times the size of a Nimitz class aircraft carrier, move it towards a planet, turn it around, and fire the engines, and it will actually destroy the planet. That's what it would take. So you would sterilize that world just by doing that.
Which brings us to something else. So now we have our awesome fleet battles, and we have the objectives of a intergalactic war. So what we've established is that planets are a terrible place to live. It'd be better to live in space, and they're easy targets. So if you got your million fleet space navy, then what's your objective strategically? And what type of distances are we talking about? Do those things factor in, or is that just something that is just me being?
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean by the distances?
Well, I mean, because I'm assuming that if you got millions of ships and they're traveling to these massive speeds and all these things, would that be something that would happen in a singular solar system, or is that going to happen in more in the void spaces? Or, I mean, how much space do you need to have a million ships fighting in engagement?
You could put 1 million ships fighting between here and the moon if you wanted to,
but not be able to see each other, because they wouldn't be able to see each other.
In that particular scenario, they'd be able to see each other, but you could actually have 1 million ships engaged in a battle that goes from here to Mars, to be honest.
Right.
In a formation where they wouldn't be too close together. A lot of it comes down to how you want to concentrate firepower and stuff like that, and avoid the enemy's grape shot. Because the one thing that the defenders will have is they're going to have a lot of like every asteroid's probably going to have a railgun on it firing grape shot out into space, and they're going to know where it's all firing from, so they're not going to fly there. And you have to, so a lot of the enemy ships would space out a lot to avoid that sort of thing. And then you do things like you'd concentrate fire on them, because you know where it's safe, so you're going to be hanging out where it's safe in a group, and you concentrate fire on them. Like I said, a lot of it does depend on how fast ships move. Like if you're writing a series where people can use an can jump into the middle of another star system, they're probably not moving that fast when they show up. Versus if you're writing a type of book where people have to come to the edge of a star system and then fly in, they're going to get going pretty fast, because it takes a long time to actually go fast. So a lot of it depends on how quickly the ships are moving past each other. I wrote this one battle in the most recent book where an engagement lasts 14 seconds. As the one group of ships are sort of, they've actually put themselves into a long cone, and the other ships are going to fly through it, and it takes them 14. Well, the weapons are only in range for 14 seconds as they're going through this whole thing, which was actually, to be honest, a lot of fun, because if you take a battle like that and you sort of slow it down, and you describe like different events that are happening in slow motion, you can make it incredibly intense. And at the end, you're like, and that was 14 seconds. Time to come around and do round 2 type of thing. You can actually make for a lot of fun. And another book I wrote, the ships were in a system at a standoff. One group was orbiting this one world, and the other group was actually orbiting the worlds further out. So their relative speeds were actually very slow compared to one another. So they actually had kind of a slugfest. But it was only because they sort of the negotiations had failed, and they ended up in this standoff. And then they were just wailing on each other at relatively close distances. Most of the ships were only 10, 15,000 kilometers apart while they were fighting. But then I noticed a lot of you guys are like, "Dear God, this sounds horrible." I can see that in the comments. Some of the people are like, "Dear God, this sounds horrible," because it sounds like a lot of math. But once you kind of learn some of the basic stuff, you can kind of figure it out. But it really makes it so that you're forced to think about a really good story a lot of the time. Like it makes your plot make a lot more sense.
Absolutely.
And, because the readers will call you out in too much hand wavium. At least they will. I mean, if you're writing space fantasy, they'll call you out in hand wavium. But if you're going to write something for a military science fiction reader, they're pretty particular about hand wavium.
Mm-hmm.
I love it if they can tell you about a lot of this stuff, and they'll get your readers who will really like your books. So it's one of the reasons why I focus on it.
I think if you can do like if we mentioned David Weber earlier, in his earlier books, he had some really good engagements between single ships and then fleets of ships. And I think if you have a good mix there,
Yeah.
Of smaller battles, and the first book you wrote on Basilisk Station, the last battle between the Q ship and then I can't remember what Honor's ship was called, but it lasted several chapters, and it was a chase out of the system, and it was a relatively long chase and a relatively long battle because he was operating on the same premise that you're operating on, is just it's more hard science fiction than space fantasy, and so you had this long, because of the speeds and distances and math that was involved in that. There was a lot of tension on the bridge of the ship because of the chase and everything else that was going on. So,
well, it lets you write the World War II submarine battle, basically.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like you got the sonar, like where are they, how far away, what's their bearing and stuff like that, which is huge tension stuff. And another great thing, if you take your time with it, you can I mean, not that your goal is to chew up a lot of your book with it, but you can actually write a very large, compelling climax, and it won't feel rushed to the readers or anything like that.
I want to switch gears from the massive space battles and hard science fiction space battles that we've been talking about to try to go into like the smaller scale, and maybe more Star Wars-esque battles, because I think you can do a mix of both and you're going to please different readers or the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before I do that, obviously we have a show sponsor today, and today our show sponsor is, as always, BZ Hercules for her editing services. Our viewers and listeners can get a 15% discount off all editing, proofing, and triangulation services at her website. You can go to keystrokemedium.com/BZ Hercules. It will redirect you to her site and get that discount. So check that out if you need the proofing or editing or some really good kind of developmental services. Check her out and get that discount. You won't be disappointed. And then let's talk about the smaller scale space battles. I really enjoy, even though Star Wars is way not in the realm of possibility at all. For instance, the final battle in the Rogue One movie that came out just this last year was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. How do you do that in book? Do you have any tips or ideas on how to make good small scale action battles like that in book form?
Yeah, I think I've done a number of them because, like you said, they do help. But I gotta say that I think I spent like a good 3 minutes screaming inside my head, "Why aren't they shooting yet?" In that last battle, because two Imperial Star Destroyers sitting there on their duffs. Apparently, the Imperials don't keep their fighters out. The fighters just all stay in the hangars all the time.
It was a union break. They got contract.
Yeah. Like, we don't do patrols. There's budget cuts. We can't handle this shit. That part. But except for that part, they did that battle pretty well. I think when they jumped in, the fight should have been on instantly. Imagine the tension it would have created. They jump in and boom, laser fire everywhere. It would have been amazing. But they boned it with this 3-minute wait while the Star Destroyers just sat there. And you're like, what are they doing? That part drove me nuts. But aside from that, I think it was actually warming up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I like the mandatory union break they had going on there.
Yeah, it's like of course I got a lot of kids, so we watched Megamind back when it was new, and there's the whole scene where they're going to funnel the sun into a weapon. And he says he's trying to get the weapon ready. He says, it's warming up. He's like, the sun is warming up. That's what I was thinking. Anyway,
that was one of my, I really like the sixth or the seventh Star Wars movie. I can't remember its name, Force Awakens. But when they funneled the whole mass of the sun into their plan, like, you guys realize that would just become the sun now, right? You can't put the sun side of it's just now it's the sun.
Now it's the sun.
I melted my planet. Yay.
Nice try, guys.
Good job. So like a smaller engagement. You've written several for your books.
You could do some fun things. Like at the beginning of my book, it's called Destiny Lost. There's this star freighter smuggling ship, and some pirates are after them, and they're trying to get out to a jump point. Because the premise behind mine is that when you jump, you actually move into the same layer of space where dark matter exists, and there's a lot of it near a star. So if you jump into FTL near a star, you're just going to slam into something and be dead. So they had to get out a certain way to get a clear lane out of the system. And so there's about 7,000 words of these pirates chasing them, and they're trying everything they can to to get away from these guys, because it's down to the point because they have to match velocities, but the pirates would want to overshoot them. So they're dropping mines, they're firing lasers. They're actually firing lasers against the other ships to help accelerate, because that will actually push you. It'll slowly the ship will push you forward. So they're like pulling out all the stops. And then eventually, this is sort of one of my fun things. I have a lot of these things called relativistic missiles in my series, because you can actually take a missile and make it travel just under the speed of light pretty easily, and all it's got to do is hit you and you're done. And they can turn really fast because there's no one on them, stuff like that. So the pirates fire a relativistic missile at them, and then at that point it's like a race down to like a second to get out of the system. But there's stuff like that you can do where it's smaller one-on-one ships, where you're not writing just all the giant warships all the time, because when you write all the giant warships, in war, most times the militaries don't fight unless they are either desperate or they're certain of victory. And usually one side one thing and the other side is the other thing. So it's not like you don't have a lot of really even battles, but when you do smaller ones, you certainly can, and you can do a lot of fun stuff. You have to pull out all the stops.
Probably if they have an even battle, somebody did something horribly wrong, and if they live through the battle, they're probably getting fired afterwards.
Yeah, maybe? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so so there's that. Someone that actually mentioned using fighters, and I actually do use a lot of fighters, because that actually makes you can actually do a lot more fun stuff when you start putting people out in fighters, and they're out there in a squadron trying to take out a capital ship or something like that. Because then you got a lot of talking between the different people in the squadron trying to pull off their run on the capital ship or something like that. So a lot of times there are parts of my books where they break away and they're following smaller ships in the engagement and stuff like that, which works out nicely as well.
I really enjoy. I like it both ways. I like it both ways. I like
Just stop. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
When you have capital ship, you have capital ship battles. Scott, you have capital ship battles, but then you also have fighter battles, and the tension is different for both. And I like that you can kind of jump between, and you can have kind of an overall where the battle commander is seeing what is happening on the battle, and that's one type of tension. And then if you have a POV character that is a fighter pilot or a bomber pilot or whatever, you can get into a smaller, more intense POV and have the tension be just affecting that character instead of the entire fleet. I like the mix of the two.
Yeah, basically you're writing the space battle from the end of Jedi.
Yes.
There you go. So if you have, you said you had 13 points of view in your book and stuff. So are some of those like your bridge captains, your fighter pilots, or do you have different roles in the battle as far as characterization?
Yeah, so there's the main points of view happen. There's four main things that are going on. There's the admirals that are commanding their fleets. So some points of view for them. There's the main characters, kids who hijacked the starship and got themselves into the battle. And they're actually assigned a squadron and have to take out a carrier. Because the other interesting thing happened in this one is they built a lot of ships, but they didn't have enough people to crew them. So they're like they have like 10,000 ships that are being manned by like 4 AI type of things. So that's how the girls were able to steal a ship and no one really notices.
Nice.
And then you've also got at one point one of the enemy fleets, because the enemy in this particular scenario, the enemy actually wants to capture the worlds because they want to get the technology that the colonists have. Because remember, these are the colonists that have the advanced technology from humanity's golden age. So they don't want to just blow up all the planets. They actually want to capture the population and use them as hostages to get the technology. So they actually land 30,000 assault craft on one of the planets. So then another big part of the whole thing is all the civilians left on the planet who are running all of the planetary defense systems, trying to keep themselves from being completely overrun. And then the last thing they do is the admiral does have a master plan for taking out all the enemy, but they want to capture one of the admirals on the other side so they can get some intel from him. So there's this other infiltration thing where they're actually infiltrating one of the enemy ships in the middle of the battle as well. And then all four of those things climax at the exact same time.
Do you see one of the things that I have trouble with sometimes in what you just described as somebody going on board a ship or like boarding parties or something? You have For instance, I've got an idea for a book where a certain ship has been taken over by, let's just say, pirates for the sake of argument, and they're holding, and they're holding the ship hostage and whatever, and then they have to send these special Marines in to basically save the day or whatever, right? And my original idea was, okay, so if it was on Earth in present time, maybe they would do like one of the SEAL submarines and come up underneath and kind of like cut through the ship or something. And maybe that would be something that they could do in space, something similar to that. Do you look at that and say, well, they're going to have sensors all over the ship and they're going to have computers and they're going to know about that stuff? Or is there stuff that you can tweak to kind of change that around? So what do you think about that kind of a take on things?
Yeah, I mean, it gets pretty tricky because if you're flying a ship around in space, you've got to know what's around you pretty well. Otherwise, you're not going to last that long. I mean,
right.
I guess it depends on what your shield tech is like in your story. But if you don't have, if you have scenarios where ships might have their shields down, all it takes is one pebble to end your ship. If you're traveling speed, so you would have pretty good sensors. You'd know what's out there. But everything has blind spots, and you could have blind spots for a variety of reasons. Like, for example, if a starship is flying, its blind spot is its engines. You can't look back past your engines very well. So if you have a ship that has really good shielding, you could actually fly right up someone else's engine wash maybe, and then get really close.
I read something recently where they flipped the ship to stop, and one of the reasons, and it talked about, I think it might have been in Dalzell's book, where he flips the ship, but the captain's aware that this is going to make him blind. He's going to blind himself going in because he's slowing down and he can't see past his own engines that are stopping him. So that what you said reminded me of that.
Then you have to think to yourself, they would probably have probes. They just drop a bunch of drones out of their ship as well. I mean, our Navy already does stuff like that today. So it depends, I guess, on how picky your readers, but you might have a reason to say why they didn't drop the probes. Maybe they were out. They didn't go to Radio Shack.
They may have done something like that. I can't remember.
Didn't go to Radio Shack.
Yeah. But I mean, you got stuff too. Like I wrote mine where they got the specs in the ship through a prior infiltration operation. They got the specs in the ship and they knew where a blind spot was, so they were able to get in that one. So the great thing about that sort of thing too is when you start thinking about all this stuff, you're like, okay, I've just developed a subplot. I just got 15,000 words in this story. I've got a subplot where they've got to get the specs for the ship or something like that.
How do you board a ship in a space battle? I mean, there's lots of different ways. There's like a software hack, or like having the specs, or waving them.
When you plot out a space battle, for instance, with your Orion Rising book, do you look at it and say, okay, I need A, B, and C to happen during this battle and then back plot it so that will happen? Or do you just kind of say, okay, it's a battle, let's do chaos and go from there and see where it happens?
Well, I guess in this particular one, actually the last two major ones I wrote, I worked out the different factions that would be there. And I worked out roughly how many ships I thought they could get there, get into the battle at that given time, and then where they would arrive and how things would play out. And once I sort of had the numbers and where they all came from, a lot of it just sort of happened from there. I didn't know where I wanted to go ultimately because obviously I wanted to make sure that the good guys didn't all die effectively.
Right.
That would be great until everybody died.
And that's how the novel ended.
And then the universe ended, and there was no planets to live on.
But a lot of it, to be honest, there are some times I'll write it and then I'll have to rewrite the space battle over again because it's just I get it all planned out. I'm like, you know what? I've either A, gone somewhere I don't think is feasible anymore, or B, I put myself in this place where I can't think of any rational reason why my good guys should be able to win anymore. Or it was too easy. That can happen too sometimes. Like, no, the bad guys wouldn't have even shown up because they would have known they would have lost. So it does happen. I have to write them over again sometimes.
How long does it take to write a good space battle?
Oh God, this last one. I mean, it's a 100,000 word book, and about 60,000 words of it is the space battle, and that probably took me about 4 weeks, and then it took me 2.5 weeks to edit it. After that, and I still have one more.
That's 4 weeks as a full-time writer, right? So how many hours a day is that for 4 weeks?
That I was probably only working on that for maybe 4 or 5 hours a day to get it all done. And then, like I said, there were some rewrites. And I said to myself, I am never doing this again.
That's when you know you've done something right, is when you swear you'll never do it again.
Yeah. So I'm like, all those space battles now will be much smaller.
The other technical thing I just thought of when you talk about space battles and spaceships is we talked a lot about weapons and how they react and how they interact and how they work in space. And something that I used to get caught up on a lot is when I was world building my science fiction or my navies, I'd say, okay, we're going to have a frigate, we're going to have a cruiser, we're going to have a battle cruiser, we're going to have an aircraft carrier, we're going to have like 8 different classes of fighters. And I'd sit down and I'd figure out what the fighter, like what it was firing and if it was a 2-man fighter or whatever. And they'd just kind of go nuts and like Jane's book of ships on this, on this world building exercise. Is that something that you do in your own fiction, or do you just say do you have like a, like I know, Scott, where you were going, do you have like a shipography or something that you look at and you say, okay, this fleet has such and such amount of ships and these are the classes? How do you handle that?
I've become a lot less specific about it now that I've got such large ships and fleets, and some of the fleets are comprised of like 1,000 member worlds, all contributed ships. So like they could actually have like only 4 or 5 of each type. I mean, the classes, they would have a lot of different classes. I kind of just break it down. I refer to most ships, they're either cruisers or destroyers is what they're typically called. And then there's some massive carriers. And like the bigger carriers could actually have like 100,000 to 200,000 fighters in them.
Oh, wow.
I write big starships. Most of the starships are at least 10 kilometers long, the big ones.
So what do you do as far as from a personnel standpoint? I mean, how do with these fleets that are this big, what do these people, if you're sending like thousands and thousands of ships full of people out to die at a time, how do they get them to do that?
Well, I mean, usually they in this particular scenario, they thought they had overwhelming force.
Okay.
So that's why they all went in like that. And although they knew they were going to take some losses because this one colony had pretty advanced technology, but they thought they were doing overwhelming force. And the colonists had actually hollowed out 4 moons. And they had constructed a 20,000 ship fleet within these moons that no one knew they even had. So that's sort of how I pulled that off. Because yeah, they would have, everybody else basically in existence ganging up on them would have sent more ships if they knew they had to, type of thing. So I had to come up with a reason why they didn't send all the ships they possibly could. But they still thought they had overwhelming force, and then as it turned out, they didn't. But the other thing I did was that the different factions that were coming in. We're all worried the other faction was going to get the technology if they didn't stick around. So they all had a reason for trying to give their all to succeed in the end.
And then they're all convinced they're on the winning side. It's obviously, and strategy. I can't talk today.
It's contagious.
I should just stop talking so much.
Yeah.
Today.
So what's your favorite space battle to write? Do you like writing the big ones or the small ones?
I like writing the small ones now.
Lesson learned.
When I first started doing this, I quite literally wrote, and this is one of the reasons why it took me so long. I wrote like 35,000 words of the big battle from the admiral's point of view. And I realized I was bored with it, and I knew that my readers, if I was bored with it, my readers were going to be really bored with it. Mm-hmm. And so I realized, and I knew I knew that I needed to take the story down to different characters, to a smaller point of view to make it more interesting for the reader, and make it so that the characters are reacting more as well because they're in the thick of things. And once I sort of realized how well to do that and how to balance it, especially in this book, I probably would do it again, to be honest, now that I won't make all the same mistakes I made the first time around.
Yeah.
But the characters actually do mention that there's never going to be another fight quite this big because now the war is going to spread out and no one's going to want to concentrate their forces, kind of like reason for why this won't happen again for a while.
Right. Well, that's the thing is hopefully we don't learn for a long time, but tactics do change to a certain extent. Although you get World War I and say, they should have learned that lesson during the American Civil War and some other conflicts prior to that.
It is surprising the things that people, and I guess if you're going to write space battles and whatnot, you do want to research some historical ones like Civil War had machine guns, had steel battleships. World War I comes around, no one's using machine guns. The battleships are all wood again. Like the beginning of World War I, they had wood. And beginning of World War II, the Polish military was on horseback.
Right.
type of thing. Like you wouldn't have expected that to
I
happen.
thought I read a articles or a blog someplace that at the beginning of World War One, the American Army had like 7 million horses, or
Yeah.
something like a huge amount.
The other thing that you have to keep in mind too is the rate. We're about out of time now. The rate at which a military can build up. For example, the U.S. military lost the Pacific Fleet at the beginning of World War II, and then I want to say it was 7 months later. On D-Day, the combined Allies put forth the largest fleet humanity had ever seen, and then 6 months later, the United States put forth a larger fleet on the Pacific on their own. So the United States went from no Pacific fleet to the largest fleet humanity had ever seen in less than a year. So you can build a fleet pretty damn fast. So it's something you have to consider as well. That if you have a bunch of people in your story and they're in a war footing, and you're talking about a stellar economy where they have entire planets that they can consume for resources. In 10 years, people could be putting together million-ship fleets. It wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility. You'd have to have a reason why they can't, or something, or just sort of say, it doesn't happen. But it's a thing. So
Terry Toombs asks if you are ever going to write a book on how to world build or create these space battles or fleets or.
I guess I could. I imagine there must be books out there like that already, though. Maybe there aren't. I don't know.
I don't know. I can't say that I've ever seen a how to space battle book. You could call it that. How to space battle.
How to space battle. I can tell a lot of you guys, you're like, dear God, I don't want to do anything like what this guy's talking about. You can do the hand wavium versions. They're still relatively consistent. Then you could do the hardcore versions.
No, but I really liked what you were saying about the electron gun and maybe it was the plasma one that you can actually see, because for a long time there, like you said, you can't see lasers in space. So a lot of my spaceborne weapons are like rail guns or torpedoes or something like that, something that you can see and pick up on a sensor. So that way when I'm writing, I'm like, oh, and he saw a laser bolt go over his cockpit, but now I can say it was an electron bolt or whatever, and that makes somewhat more scientifical sense than saying, because then everybody's like, oh no, you can't see that.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, if you use proton beams, electron beams, atomic beams, you would see. I mean, you would see these things. You would actually see, because they'd be smashing through. Even space would be thick enough that they'd be smashing through it, and you would actually see them obliterating hydrogen atoms in space as they went along. The other thing, actually, one of the quick thing that was really neat when I started researching how powerful starship engines were, I realized that if our solar system was colonized and had a lot of stuff going on, you'd see starships breaking around Mars with a telescope here on Earth. Or if you're on the moon, you would just be able to look up in the night sky and see starships around Mars accelerating and braking. That's how bright their engines would be. So if you're going to describe a space battle, a lot of people running fusion engines and whatnot, it would be like 1,000 suns are all lit up around the battlefield, which is actually, you can describe some pretty cool battles that way.
Yeah.
I guess,
well, in the current sci-fi book I'm writing space battles, and I'm a little nervous about it because it's not my strong point. But some of my newer enemy, they have kind of what you're talking about. They look almost like the name of the book's Burning Sun, obviously, but because they're putting out so much heat. And my idea was to move these ships and to do all these things and have these engines that are so powerful that they literally, from a distance, all you would see is a heat signature because they're just putting out so much energy.
Yeah.
So
if you're coming into a system, you do have to turn around to brake. You've got to fire engines on the front, so it would actually look like a star showing up, actually.
Right. And then to see, 1 million of those pop into your system all of a sudden could be kind of intimidating, I imagine.
A star of death.
You would actually alter the weather patterns on the planets just by showing up, which is
for the better or for the worse. I mean, because
depends, I guess, on the planet. If it's a nice planet, it'd be like a great place to hang out after that.
Let's all go to Hoth and have a space battle above Hoth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the radiation may make your skin might melt off from the radiation.
Radiation's radiation.
Exactly.
We've already established that planets are not the place to be. So
it's just a big target that has a weak crust that just one shot and the whole thing's molten and nasty.
It goes down.
And generally a bad place to hang out.
Yeah, planets.
Oh well, Michael, share a little bit about where our readers or our listeners and viewers can find out more about you and your books.
So I have a website which is Aeon14, AEON14.com, and then of course the other great place is just look me up on Amazon. Just search on Amazon for Michael Cooper. And even though I write under MD Cooper, and for some reason I show up under Michael Cooper as well. So where else you can find me?
Awesome.
And when did you say your next book was coming out?
June 22nd. That's June 22nd is the one that has the. It's actually about 200,000 ships all told in the battle on both sides. So
and that's Orion Rising, right?
Orion Rising, yeah.
I linked that. I want to say I linked it right at the beginning of the show, but apparently it disappeared. Nope. I linked close proximity. I linked Pew Pew and close proximity in the beginning of the show notes. And
all of our live people can get those.
Yeah, but they'll be in the show notes afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, Guy, by the way, gravity drives would have an effect as well because you're still conservation of energy. It's the same thing as using a fusion drive, actually. Great radiation.
Talk about that for a minute. What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, he said he's using gravity drives, but if you're, basically the way rockets work is you push something out at one speed and, the ship will move at the appropriate speed based on the mass and velocity of the thing coming out the other end. So whether or not that's gravitons that you're pushing out or it's a chemical propellant, you're still going to push something out the other side. It's going to hit something at some point. And for example, one of the types of engines you could run was called an antimatter pion drive. You smash antimatter together, it creates these things called pions, and they exit the back of your ship as gamma rays at the speed of light. And you're like, hey, it's gamma rays. Well, gamma rays are actually possibly the worst thing you could shoot at the back of your ship. That's no one's allowed to so you actually write some fun things too. Like in my books, there's a lot of laws and rules around you can't run your AP drive within this distance of anything,
right.
or they're going to come after you. But even gravity drives, you actually think about that because you could actually fire up your gravity drive next to a space station and you kick the thing over. There's a lot of cool stuff like that.
Like, sorry about that. I was just trying to go get a hamburger from In-N-Out Burger.
Yeah, didn't mean to fracture the crust on your planet down there. Pardon me.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a fantastic hour. I'm probably going to have to listen to this show like 5 times to remember everything that we talked about because there was a lot of information thrown out there, which is a lot of great information. Michael, thanks for coming back and hanging out with us, man. It was really fun.
Blast.
Cool. Good
stuff. Go ahead, Scott.
I'm saying I'm just a little sad and I died inside because now I know you can't see lasers in space.
You cannot see lasers in space.
You can see them on planets, but you can't see them in space.
All right. So, all my battles are on planets now. That's it.
Trash your entire manuscript and start over.
Yeah, starting over. No big deal. I've done it before.
Although lasers are X-ray lasers, and you can't see those on planets either.
That depresses me because every time I read Weber's X-ray pumped laser nuclear whatever, I kept seeing these big huge X-ray bomb explosions, and now you've taken that away from me. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Dreams.
Well, everybody that was hanging out with us in the live chat, thanks for coming and hanging out with us. We really enjoyed it. As always, there was much shenanigans and ruckus and mayhem, and if you were not watching live, you did not get to participate. It was always great fun talking with you, Michael. Love having you on. We'll have to have you back on to talk about, more about some collaborations and see how your collaboration as it goes on, maybe how it grows and how that's affecting your business. And that might be it.
And we did not even touch on all the the marketing and some of the things we talked about in the pre-show, and that might be something people are interested in the future.
That's the little pre-order thing we talked about. I have a book on Facebook ads coming out on 15th as well.
Oh, nice. The 15th of this month?
This month, yeah. It's called Help My Facebook Ads Suck.
I'm going to buy 2 copies of that.
Does it work better if you buy 2 copies?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Way better. Way better.
Way better.
And read it on KU. Actually,
well, hey guys, thanks for hanging out. If you have any thoughts on the show, let us put them in the comments below. Give us a like and thumbs up. We will have Neil Asher on the show coming up Monday on live, and then Ian Garner will be on the show next Thursday night. For those of you that don't know, Ian Garner is Hank Garner's son, and he is also a writer, and so he will be on the show. And then Jack Cooper 2 weeks from now, or not Jack Campbell will be on the show 2 weeks from now. So make sure you tune in for that. As always, for Scott Moon, I am Josh Hayes. We have been live with MD Cooper here on Thursday night. Make sure you come back next week where we're going to talk about some reading. We're going to talk about some writing and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. You guys have a great night.